Created by Dan Levy and Rachel Sennott, Netflix's new comedy drama series Big Mistakes revolves around a loving, chaotic family. And the unforeseen troubled siblings Nikki and Morgan found themselves in after they stole a cheap piece of jewelry from a convenience store. Nikki, Morgan, and Natalie had gathered to support their mother Linda, who'd been relentlessly taking care of her bedridden mother. She was dying, and Linda thought it would be something to celebrate her birthday before she passed away. Natalie was Linda's perfect youngest daughter, always by her side, listening to her every little complaint, and she'd even bought birthday gifts for her grandma. Linda expected Nikki and Morgan to bring something memorable for their grandma. She had lost a diamond necklace during her honeymoon, and even on her deathbed she remembered it. Morgan scoffed at first. She was a public school teacher, so she couldn't afford a diamond necklace. Linda quickly realized that it didn't matter if it was cheap, just a bling necklace for nostalgia's sake would do. The request was simple, but what followed was absolutely mind-boggling. So with a spoiler warning, let's jump straight into the show. Why did Morgan and Nikki start working for a criminal organization? Morgan and Nikki dropped by a convenience store before visiting their grandma at the hospital. Nikki picked up a birthday card, while Morgan had her eyes on a necklace in the jewelry section. The guy at the register made it clear that the necklace wasn't up for sale, but Morgan just couldn't understand why. The necklace was on display, and it was supposedly the last piece, yet the guy refused to sell it to her. She took offense and ended up stealing it. Their mother at first complained that they had arrived late, and their grandma had already passed away. But she was glad to see that they didn't forget to bring the necklace, and Linda asked her son to say a prayer and put it around his grandma's neck. Nikki and Morgan went back home thinking the necklace had saved the day, only to soon realize that stealing it and putting it around their grandma's neck was the worst mistake of their lives. Nikki was a pastor who took pride in the work that he did, although he'd been considering changing his congregation, because the one he was at present recognized his sexuality but abstained him from practicing it. He'd been seeing a guy, Tariq, and all that lying had been making him uncomfortable. This was the only problem in his life at the time, until the guy from the convenience store knocked at his door and threatened him to return the necklace. Nikki was petrified, so he drove to his mother's place to speak to Morgan. She didn't believe him at first, as she thought it was quite an exaggerated reaction for a $75 necklace. Nikki soon realized that the man had followed him in his van to his mother's house, and he asked Morgan to talk to him if she didn't believe him. When Morgan went to speak to him, he simply showed her his gun, and that was enough for her to realize he wasn't kidding. The plan was to take the necklace off their grandma's neck before her casket was lowered to the ground. As the pastor, Nikki had some advantages, and while he did get a brief moment alone with the dead body, it wasn't enough to get the necklace off. He tried to come up with excuses to stay with the body, but none of that worked. Morgan and Nikki stared helplessly at the closed casket, and they had no choice but to make peace with the fact that the necklace was gone. Yusuf, the Turkish guy from the convenience store, wasn't ready to make peace. He made it to the funeral, took Morgan and Nikki on a ride, and threatened to kill them if they failed to bring back the necklace in 24 hours. It was a high-value stolen necklace that Yusuf had kept on display with other fake jewelry, hoping that the cops wouldn't notice it, but he'd evidently made a bad decision. As a pastor, Nikki couldn't imagine exhuming his grandma for a necklace, but then again, did they even have a choice? Morgan was ready to do whatever was necessary to be done with this constant worry. She lied to her long-term boyfriend who'd recently proposed to her about cheating on him just so that he would leave her alone and she would get to dig up her grandma's casket. The plan worked, and she got to work soon after it got dark. Nikki couldn't let his sister deal with this mess all alone, so he decided to show up, and thank God he did. As it turned out, Morgan had been digging up the wrong spot for hours, so Nikki had to ultimately get the job done. He hated every minute of it, and in the morning, when Yusuf arrived in his truck, he simply wanted to hand the necklace over and part ways forever. But Yusuf refused to just take the necklace and stated that they must return it to his boss. And quite unexpectedly, Nikki and Morgan found themselves in the elegant mansion of Russian gangster Ivan. He thought it was brave of Morgan to steal the necklace, and he also appreciated them for the lengths they went to get the necklace back. He believed that Nikki and Morgan could be of use to him, so he handed them 2 burner phones and mentioned that he would be calling them soon. Nikki and Morgan couldn't say no to the gangster, but at the same time, they hoped that the phone wouldn't ever ring. But of course, the phones rang, and before they knew it, they were conducting business for Ivan. While Morgan relished the thrill of working for a gangster, something that her job as a public school teacher failed to offer her, Nikki hated every minute of it. He was doing it because he didn't think he had a choice. But Nikki and Morgan decided to draw a line after a particular task. They were asked to buy 2 Brazilian bulls in an auction, and since it didn't go as planned, Nikki had to lie to the man who'd bought the bulls and convince him to donate them to his congregation. He had to come up with an elaborate lie, and he hated the person he was becoming because of the trouble he'd gotten himself into. The siblings were repulsed when they discovered that the bulls were being used to smuggle cocaine. Nikki figured he had to be brave, and although Ivan threatened to shoot them, he and Morgan chose to walk away from him, and he couldn't do much about it. Why did Nikki get in touch with Ivan? Just when Nikki thought the worst was over and it was finally his time to take control of his life, he found himself in trouble again. His boyfriend Tariq had been a chair member of the Out and Loud organization that was supposed to organize a charity event and honor him at the event. But on the day of the event, it became quite clear that the organization was a scam. Tariq didn't know about it, and when he tried to call Tegan, who headed the organization, his phone was switched off. Tegan had run off with the charity money, and Tariq didn't know what to do about it. But he thought that his guilt of being with someone who wasn't ready to acknowledge their relationship publicly made him feel inadequate, and Out and Loud became his only respite. He ignored the red flags because being a part of the organization made him feel that he was being his authentic self. Nikki felt guilty about the whole situation because he didn't expect his decision to keep the relationship a secret for a while to have such a devastating effect on Tariq. He felt the need to fix things, and he knew that only Ivan could help him. Well, he was right. Ivan was ready to track down Tegan, threaten him, and get the money. But in exchange, Nikki and Morgan had to accompany him to Miami. Morgan didn't need much convincing, and they signed up without realizing what they were expected to do. Soon, they discovered that Ivan had been in talks with the Brazilian cartel, and they planned on moving their product in Miami without the knowledge of the Italian mafia, who they'd been working for all along. Things started to fall apart as soon as they landed in Miami. Ivan and his gang were supposed to meet the Brazilian cartel on neutral ground, but they refused to do so and asked them to visit them at their house. And if Ivan didn't do so, then they wouldn't consider doing a deal with him. Ivan was in a tough spot, and he ultimately figured he had to take the risk if he planned on making his business big. Who was responsible for the Miami massacre? Nikki and Morgan arrived at the mafia mansion dressed in their best clothes, since Ivan wanted them to look the part. They received a warm welcome, but their tone soon shifted when Paolo arrived at the party. He was the head of the cartel, and clearly someone people feared. Paolo was suspicious of Nikki and Morgan. He'd done his homework, and he knew that one was a pastor and the other a school teacher, and he wondered what they were doing at his mansion. Nikki tried explaining how their day jobs helped them get the job done without putting them on the radar of the cops, but he wasn't thoroughly convinced. So he asked Nikki and Morgan to snort some cocaine in front of him to win his trust. The siblings did as was asked, and Paolo finally welcomed them. The next morning, he kept Nikki and Morgan company and took them out on his yacht while one of his gang members asked Ivan and Andrei to accompany him. Ivan and Andrei immediately realized that something was about to go very wrong. They were asked to get out of the car in the middle of the woods, and they were handed 2 shovels. They were expected to dig their own graves, but Ivan didn't give up hope. He explained how they could smuggle cocaine with over 100 bulls in a month, and they would gradually take over the Italian mafia's market. It soon became clear that Paolo was worried that Yusuf could get them in trouble. He'd left without saying a word, and the Brazilians had found out about it. Ivan repeatedly stated that they didn't have to worry, and when one of the men pointed his gun at him, Andrei responded that he'd taken care of Yusuf. He explained that Yusuf had run away to Turkey, and he'd had someone deal with him. He added that in their line of work, that was how they dealt with the loose ends, and he would do so again if anyone dared to betray them. Paolo was finally convinced that he could make a deal with Ivan, and instead of killing the 4 of them, he threw a party to celebrate the deal. Just when everyone in the room relaxed a little, there was a shootout. the server was actually gunmen who killed pretty much everyone in the room, including Ivan, Andre, and Paulo, except Nikki and Morgan. Nikki and Morgan assumed that whoever planned the attack didn't think they were trouble, and they chose to let them go. So they must try to forget the entire episode and try to get back to their ordinary lives. But it wasn't easy. Morgan ended up almost running her car over her fiancé when her burner phone started to ring. Nikki confessed the truth to his boyfriend, who was too confused to respond. When he returned home one day, he noticed that his window was open and he could sense that someone was in the house. He checked his burner phone, and just like Morgan, he too had received calls that he chose to ignore. A man covered his head with a cloth and took him away. When the cloth was removed, he realized that Yusuf had abducted him and Morgan, but they didn't know the reason behind it. Yusuf explained that he'd taken Morgan's advice into consideration and decided to aim higher. Since he wasn't getting the importance he craved for, he decided to rat Ivan out to the Italian mob. Yusuf thanked Morgan as he believed it was because of her that he got a promotion, and he finally had some power. So as it turned out, Yusuf and the mob were responsible for the massacre in Miami. Will there be a season 2? 3 Italian men walked up to Nikki and Morgan, and they told them that they'd had their eyes on Ivan, Andre, Nikki, and Morgan the whole time they were in Miami. And while they knew every minor detail, they were curious to find out more about the conversation that Nikki and Paolo's son, Felipe, had in the washroom. Felipe had taken a liking to Nikki, and he'd approached him in the washroom. But Nikki chose not to get involved, since he was in a monogamous relationship with Tariq. Nikki was held at gunpoint, but he refused to disclose that Felipe was gay, since it was something he told Nikki in secrecy. He told the Italian men that Felipe had sought advice from him on spirituality. They had even pulled the trigger, but thankfully the gun wasn't loaded. They simply wanted to be sure that Nikki wasn't holding back any important information. They made it quite clear that Nikki mustn't leave on a cruise with his boyfriend for 6 months as he'd planned. They also asked him if he told his boyfriend about the trouble he gotten himself into. Nikki obviously said that he hadn't, and they were finally allowed to leave. Tariq was disappointed when he discovered that Nikki wouldn't be coming with him. Nikki also subtly hinted that Tariq must go on the cruise for his own safety, and because their relationship was pretty much in shambles, and he didn't expect Tariq to put up with the constant chaos that was around him. Well, it probably is the end of their relationship. While Morgan and Nikki were dealing with their own problems, their mother had contested the mayoral election and had won. She was supported financially and emotionally by Annette, Max's, Morgan's fiancé's, mother. Annette had even organized a gala for Linda, and naturally, Linda was grateful to her for her constant support. During Big Mistake's ending, Annette took Morgan aside and threatened to destroy her if she ever broke up with Max. She'd realized that Morgan wasn't in love with Max, but she knew that her son was head over heels for Morgan. She refused to let Morgan break his heart. Morgan was shocked. She couldn't quite fathom what was going on. Annette gifted Morgan a necklace, and soon she realized that it was the same one that they had stolen from the store. Now that brings us to the big revelation. Annette was the mob boss, and she'd had her eyes on Nikki and Morgan all this time. She knew their secret, and as she intended to use them as she pleased if Morgan dared to leave Max. Morgan had always known that Annette ran a business, but she didn't know the finer details. It also looks like Annette poured money into Linda's campaign to have significant influence over town politics. She wanted Linda to run the show while the mob smuggled drugs into the town easily. Things will get more complicated now that the two families are about to become in-laws. Morgan cannot escape the mob, and if she ends up marrying Max, she will be forever tied to the Italian mafia. Nikki too does not have an escape thanks to his sister, and unfortunately, Linda will also be dragged into the mess. Annette had funded her election, so if the word got out, they would be completely rejected by the people of the town. Morgan and Nikki will have to keep it a secret, but at the same time, putting up with Annette's whims will be a task, and there will come a point when they will want to escape it all. I can imagine Morgan being comfortable working for the mob, but Nikki? He's emotional and he never really enjoyed any of it, so chances are that he would want to escape. But is there really one? Will Nikki have to go against Morgan to do the right thing? Considering it's a comedy drama, things will surely unfold in a hilarious way in Big Mistakes Season 2. But thank you for watching this video, and do share your thoughts about Big Mistakes in the comments section below. Hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for your weekly dose of cinema and series. See you in the next one, and for the time being, we're signing off. Bye.